Sarah Parker grew up in a working-class family in a small neighborhood in Boston. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Parker, owned a small restaurant serving traditional American food. Although they didn't have much, they took pride in their work and believed in the value of hard work. From the age of 7, Sarah began helping her parents in the restaurant, folding napkins and wiping tables, then gradually learning how to write bills for customers. While other children were busy playing with dolls or toy cars, she loved sitting at the cash register, watching her parents calculate income and expenses. By the age of 10, Sarah was already managing the restaurant's basic books. One evening, when she saw her father struggling with numbers, she curiously sat down and helped him calculate. "Dad, this month's profit is lower than last month. If we raise the price a little bit, while maintaining the quality of the food, the revenue will be better," she said, her eyes shining with excitement. Mr. Parker looked at his daughter, then laughed and patted her head. "You are truly my small business genius." In the following years, Sarah continued to help her parents improve the business, from managing ingredients to suggesting new dishes to attract customers. Thanks to her hard work and sharp thinking, she won a full scholarship to Harvard University to study finance. There, she developed a financial analysis system for small businesses, helping them optimize profits based on detailed data. After graduating, she turned this idea into a startup company, and within 5 years, it became a business worth hundreds of millions of dollars, attracting the attention of many large corporations. But no matter how successful she was, Sarah always remembered the small restaurant where all her dreams began. Despite owning a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars, Sarah still lives a simple life and is secretive about her wealth. She didn't buy a fancy mansion or a flashy supercar, instead choosing to live in a compact but cozy apartment in the suburbs of Boston. In meetings, Sarah rarely mentioned her status, often introducing herself simply as a financial advisor. She still kept the habit of wearing jeans, a simple sweater, and her old favorite sneakers from college. For Sarah, success was not something to brag about, but a means to help her family and create positive change in the community. One weekend afternoon, Sarah stopped by a small coffee shop near her old university to work. She sat in the corner of the shop, concentrating on financial reports on her laptop, completely immersed in the world of numbers. Suddenly, a panicked voice rang out. "Oh my God, I'm sorry." Sarah looked up just in time to see a clumsy man almost spill his entire cup of coffee on her table. He quickly grabbed a tissue to wipe away the water, his face flushed with embarrassment. "I was texting while walking, what a bad habit." Sarah laughed, taking the tissue from his hand. "It's okay, luckily my laptop is still safe." The man was Tommy Carter, a history teacher at a local high school. Unlike the businessmen she often met in the financial world, Tommy had a rare warmth and sincerity. He was not interested in stocks or profits, but was passionate about education and always wondered how to bring knowledge to students from disadvantaged backgrounds. The conversation dragged on longer than expected, and before leaving, Tommy hesitantly said, "Can I buy you another coffee to make up for it?" A coffee led to dinner and then more meetings. With Tommy, Sarah felt like she could be herself, not a powerful CEO, not a woman who had to prove herself, but simply Sarah, a girl who grew up in her parents' small restaurant. 6 months later, Tommy proposed to her at a glorious sunset on the Charles River. There was no fancy diamond ring or elaborate proposal, just a simple ring and a sincere question. "Do you want to start a family with me?" Without hesitation, Sarah said yes. She believed she had found something more precious than success, someone who truly appreciated her, whether she was a talented businesswoman or just a simple girl in the coffee shop that day. Sarah remembered the first night she met the Carters. The dinner Tommy had eagerly arranged to introduce her to his closest friends. When the car pulled up in front of a magnificent mansion in Upper Manhattan, she took a deep breath. Tommy squeezed her hand, smiling reassuringly. "They'll love you, don't worry." But within minutes of stepping through the front door, Sarah knew it was just a consolation. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, an elegant woman with neatly trimmed silver hair and sharp eyes, examined her from head to toe, as if she were evaluating an unfamiliar item. Charlotte Carter, Tommy's older sister, wore an expensive designer dress, dark red lips, and sat proudly cross-legged. The room was luxurious, but the atmosphere was chilly to the point of fear. When Sarah politely introduced herself, Evelyn merely raised her eyebrows, her voice soft but sharp. "Tommy said you work in the service industry?" Before Sarah could reply, Charlotte smiled faintly, swirling her glass of wine in her hand. Service industry? You mean customer service? Where do you work? A coffee shop? Or, a small restaurant? Sarah could sense the disdain in Charlotte's words. She could easily argue that she was the CEO of a leading fintech company, that she wasn't serving customers but creating a system that helped financial corporations optimize billions of dollars in profits each year. But she just smiled, choosing to stay silent and observe. Tommy said nothing, just smiled awkwardly and changed the subject, as if to avoid any tension. As dinner began, Sarah found herself deliberately isolated. Charlotte talked endlessly about her lavish trips and parties with the rich, occasionally glancing meaningly at Sarah. Evelyn kept talking about the prestigious families Tommy had dated before. Tommy used to date a girl who worked in education, very suitable for the family's orientation. She came from a good background, had a lot of knowledge. It's a pity that the two of you didn't get anywhere. Evelyn looked at Sarah and smiled, her tone full of meaning. Sarah squeezed her fork lightly. She could endure the insinuations, but what disappointed her the most was Tommy. He didn't object, didn't defend her, and didn't even notice her discomfort. After dinner, when they left the villa, Sarah was silent the whole way home. When Tommy noticed the abnormality, he turned to ask, "What's wrong, honey?" Sarah smiled faintly, shaking her head. "Nothing. I was just thinking." But deep down she knew, this wasn't just a matter of background, this was a matter of respect. And if Tommy didn't have the courage to stand up for her, would this love be worth continuing? A few months later, Charlotte Carter held a lavish party at the Carter Mansion to celebrate her promotion to marketing director at Preston & Moore, a prestigious financial group. This party was not only an opportunity for Charlotte to show off her achievements, but also an opportunity to affirm the Carter family's status in the upper class. Of course, Sarah wasn't in that plan. During the dinner preparing for the event, Charlotte suddenly looked at Sarah, smiling calculatingly. "Sarah, you have experience in the service industry, right? We'll need more people to help serve that night. Do you think you could help coordinate the wait staff?" Evelyn Carter immediately clapped her hands in agreement. "That's a great idea. Sarah is used to waiting tables, right? You can make sure everything runs smoothly." Sarah was silent for a moment. She glanced at Tommy, waiting for a protest, but he just sat there, confused but not daring to speak. Charlotte kept her fake smile, her eyes shining with satisfaction. Sarah smiled softly, hiding the anger boiling inside her. "Of course, Charlotte, I'd be happy to help." She knew this would be the night everything would change. That evening, the Carter Mansion was more magnificent than ever. The crystal chandeliers, the fine wines and the powerful guests all created a lavish scene like something out of a movie. The CEOs, investors, and the leaders of Preston & Moore were all present. Sarah wore a simple black dress, not to blend in with the crowd but so that no one would suspect what was about to happen. She walked into the kitchen, coordinating with the catering team like a true professional. Charlotte, in her gorgeous evening gown, held a glass of wine and walked among the guests, enjoying the feeling of power as all eyes were on her. As the clock struck 7:55 p.m., Sarah's phone buzzed, a text from Chloe Adams, CFO of FinTech Solutions, Sarah's own company. "Everything is ready. The papers are signed. We officially own 51% of Preston & Moore." Sarah put down her phone, a slow smile on her face. At 8 p.m., James Preston, CEO of Preston & Moore, walked into the ballroom. Immediately an air of excitement filled the room. Charlotte practically ran to greet him, a triumphant smile on her face. "Mr. Preston, it's an honor to have you here," she said, her voice full of pride. James Preston glanced around, then stopped at a familiar face. He frowned slightly, seemingly surprised to see Sarah standing in the middle of the room, still wearing her simple black dress. "Miss Parker?" he exclaimed. The room fell silent. Charlotte immediately interrupted, smirking. "Mr. Preston, don't mind her. She's just my sister-in-law, helping with the serving tonight." James Preston narrowed his eyes at Charlotte, then turned back to Sarah, his surprise fading into a knowing smile. "Charlotte, do you realize that this woman has just become the new owner of your company?" The room froze. Charlotte paled. Evelyn almost dropped the glass of wine in her hand. Tommy stood there stunned as if he had been slapped. Sarah gently put down the tray, stepped forward, her voice calm but authoritative. That's right, Charlotte, I'm not just in the service industry. I'm the CEO of FinTech Solutions, and as of tonight we've completed the acquisition of Preston and Moore. Murmurs filled the room. Preston and Moore's shares had been acquired right under the Carter family's noses without them even knowing. Charlotte stammered, her eyes widening. No way. Sarah tilted her head, her voice still calm but sharp. How could I not? I'm just doing exactly what you taught me, taking advantage of the opponent's weakness when they're complacent. James Preston laughed, breaking the tension. What a spectacular turnaround, Miss Parker. I look forward to working with you in your new role. Charlotte completely collapsed, her face pale, her hands tightly gripping her wineglass. Evelyn was speechless. For the first time in her life, she felt completely helpless. As for Tommy, he looked at Sarah with eyes that were both painful and regretful. He realized that, in all the times she had been humiliated by his family, he had never stood by her side. Charlotte turned to James Preston in panic. I cannot work under the arbitrary precedents. I will resign. I cannot work under the arbitrary precedents. Sarah raised her eyebrows, giving a slight smile. Of course, that is your choice, but if you stay, I have a more suitable position for you. Charlotte clenched her fists. What? Sarah picked up her champagne glass from the table, raising it slightly. Small Business Support Project Manager, under the guidance of my mother? The person you used to look down on because you were in the service industry. The room fell into a deadly silence. Evelyn finally spoke, her voice trembling. Sarah, we are family. Sarah turned, looking straight at her, her eyes cold. Family? When you looked down on me, removed me from the family photo, let me sit with the waiter, is that family? Or is it just because now, I am no longer someone you can look down on? Evelyn was speechless. For the first time in her life she realized that she had lost. Tommy stepped forward, his voice pleading. Sarah, I'm sorry, I really love you. Sarah looked at him for a moment, then slowly took off her wedding ring, placing it on the table. Love without respect is worth nothing. I have filed for divorce. My lawyer will contact you. With that, Sarah turned and walked away, leaving the Carter family in ruins, while she stood there, proud, strong, and victorious. Sarah's spectacular turn at the party not only humiliated Charlotte Carter, but also completely destroyed the Carter family's illusion of power. After that night, news of the Preston and Moore acquisition spread quickly through the financial world. Charlotte became the laughingstock of the industry, a smug marketing executive who did not realize that she had just been taken down on her own turf by someone she had always despised. Evelyn Carter, who had always prided herself on her family's reputation, faced the greatest humiliation of her life. The high-class friends she had once boasted about now avoided her, because no one wanted to be associated with a family defeated in such a pathetic way. The Carter mansion, once a symbol of pride, was now a monument to a humiliating failure. Charlotte, bitter as she was, could not resign immediately. After several closed-door meetings, the board decided to keep her, but in a different role. A community project supporting small businesses under the supervision of Sarah's mother. You will work directly with my mother, learning how to run a real business, not just sit in a boardroom and judge others, Sarah informed Charlotte in a calm but meaningful voice. Charlotte turned pale but had no choice. After the party, Tommy tried to contact Sarah several times, but she no longer wanted to hear any excuses. He found her one afternoon, his eyes filled with despair. I was wrong. I didn't protect you, I know that, but you never told me the truth. If I knew who you were, I wouldn't have let my family treat you like that. Sarah looked at him for a long time before saying softly, Then you've answered your own question. If I were a normal girl, not the CEO of FinTech Solutions, would you have had the courage to protect me? Tommy couldn't say anything, because they both knew the answer was no. The next day the divorce papers were officially filed. Sarah didn't feel heartbroken, because this marriage had long since died, not because of lack of love, but because of lack of respect. A few months later, the Carter estate changed hands. Sarah bought it, not to live in luxury, but to turn it into the headquarters of a foundation that supports education for service industry workers. People the Carters once looked down on will now have the opportunity to change their lives, right where they were once looked down upon. Charlotte is no longer the proud woman she once was. She is forced to join the project, working with small business owners, learning how to run a real store. At first she resists, but under the guidance of Sarah's mother, she gradually changes, learning things she never thought she would. Evelyn, though still bitter, can do nothing to change the facts. Tommy, on the other hand, occasionally emails Sarah, but she never replies. Some bridges once burned should not be rebuilt. Sarah not only won, but also proved something important. A person's worth is not in their money or where they come from, but in how they treat others, especially when they think no one important is looking. 6 months later, Sarah was in the public eye as CEO of FinTech Solutions, but every weekend, she still returned to her parents' small restaurant, washing dishes, wiping tables, and serving customers, as she had done as a child. No matter how successful I become, I will always remember where I came from. And that was her greatest victory. A year later, the Carter Foundation for Educational Opportunity officially opened in the Carter Mansion. Once a symbol of arrogance and class discrimination, now it has become a training and support center for people who were once looked down upon. Restaurant workers, janitors, waiters, manual laborers looking for opportunities to rise. Sarah stood on stage cutting the ribbon, flanked by working-class entrepreneurs like her who had overcome hardship to succeed. She looked around, saw people who had been oppressed, and now, smiling with hope, saw young students eager to take free business skills classes. In the back row, Charlotte Carter stood quietly, no longer arrogant, but instead, humbled in a way she had never felt before. 6 months of working on community projects had changed her. She had met real people fighting for a better life. She had learned that true power comes not from titles, but from the value you create for others. After the ceremony, Charlotte approached Sarah, her voice no longer as sharp as before. "I'm not sorry I lost to you, Sarah, but I'm sorry I ever underestimated you." Sarah looked at her, then softly replied, "Learning this lesson is more important than any loss." Charlotte nodded, then quietly turned away. Meanwhile, Tommy Carter kept emailing Sarah, still trying to maintain a connection, but she never replied. She was no longer angry with him, nor did she blame him, but she understood that some bridges, once burned, were best not rebuilt. One day, while working at her parents' restaurant, Sarah opened her phone and saw a new email from Tommy. "I read about you in Forbes. I just wanted to say that I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry." Sarah smiled, but this time she didn't delete the email. She left it there, not because she wanted to go back, but because she had completely let go of the past. Even though she had become one of the most powerful businesswomen in finance, Sarah still hadn't changed her habit of going to her parents' small restaurant every weekend. She didn't see it as a responsibility, but as a joy, a reminder that no amount of success would make her forget where she came from. Once, a customer recognized her and exclaimed in surprise, "You're Sarah Parker, CEO of FinTech Solutions. You're serving tables." Sarah just smiled, placing a bowl of steaming soup in front of the customer. "Do you need more napkins?" She didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. Because true success is not what the world sees, but how you treat others when no one is watching. And that is the lesson the Carter family learned, the hard way. These stories teach us an important lesson. A person's worth is not determined by where they come from or how much they have, but by how they treat others and how they overcome adversity. To be successful, we need to persevere, keep learning, and stay strong even when we are underestimated. Respect and humility are the foundations for building lasting relationships. More importantly, stand up for yourself, because if you don't respect yourself, no one else will. True success is not just about winning over others, but winning over yourself. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue discovering inspiring stories about life, love, and family. Every story has a valuable lesson. Let's discuss it together and learn from it.